Hello, folks, and welcome to College Football Know-It-All, your best place, best spot on campus of UNL for some college football news. I'm your host, Alex Fernando, doing a solo show this year, but don't you worry, I will have my old partner, Nate Muehlbach, calling in later. Quick show overview for you. We got a lot of college football to discuss, and it's going to be a good show. First, obviously, got to break down the Husker game. I know. I don't want to do it just as much as you don't want to hear it. But we're going to go through the good, expected, and bad. We got some interesting news on Lamar Jackson just with what we saw during the game and what this team needs to do moving forward. We'll have after a couple commercial breaks, we'll have Nate call in. He'll be talking about the QB transfers after losing starting positions and whether that's good or bad for the game, good or bad for the players, the teams. Our new 4-game rule in college football, being able to redshirt, and then our September Heismans. You always got those. It's a great way to lose some money because you bet on people early and then they drop off the face of the planet for the last half of the season. We'll look at some upcoming games in college football this next week. I'll give you a few predictions, but you got to check out the blog to get them all come Saturday. And we'll have some playoff predictions based on just the September season. 4 or 5 games in for a lot of teams. Starting to get some distance, starting to get some conference wins. Who's out, who's in, some sleepers to watch for. This could be a year where some snubs could really have something to say about expanding the playoff. And then we'll end the show with the best thing I saw in college football this week, and I'll throw in a couple from the last couple weeks as well. But breaking down the Husker game, we'll kick it off with that. Again, I'm your host, Alex Fernando, here on College Football Know-It-All. And this show is based off of my blog that I created. And just ready to really, make a name for myself, make a name for college football and all the information that I want to give to you. So, starting off with Nebraska and Purdue, lot to break down, lot to dissect. Purdue comes away with a 42-28 victory over the Huskers. Nebraska still winless on the season, and fans obviously getting really uptight, really stressed about this team. Some are behind Frost, some are like, what's going on? Why can't he get it fixed yet? It's going to take time, folks. It's a big transition. There's some things that the previous staff left behind that were not good. There's some things that were. Having worked under Coach Riley, I worked under him and his football staff for 3 years doing recruiting tours. We brought in a lot of good guys. He brought a good culture to the program, just not the kind of culture that Scott Frost and his staff want. So it's a big transition for that. But there's a lot of good that Coach Riley did for this university and for this football team. But looking now into the game, Purdue dominated. It's clear to see that Nebraska really does not have everything together yet. And Coach Frost, his opening statements of the press conference after the game was, quote, "This is one of the most undisciplined teams in the country." That's saying a lot. And he's really struggled to get a grasp on this team early in the season, I think. I've been watching from a distance. I've not as close anymore. Obviously, I'm not doing recruiting tours anymore with this staff, so I'm not quite as behind the scenes as I used to be. But it just really, you can tell with some guys on the sidelines, the way they act, the way they run around the field, and the lack of discipline within the game. It's clear that Coach Frost is really struggling with some of these guys to really get them to click and buy into his new system. That's where I think you're going to start seeing some new faces. We've already seen some freshmen. Deontay Williams is getting a lot more playing time. Caleb Tanner. So a lot more freshmen and youth going to be seeing the field later in the season, especially with some of the other guys maybe just kind of wanting to be done after a long few years, a bad season, kind of a bad taste in their mouth. A lot of these young guys are going to get chances. They're going to get the reps, especially with the new 4-game rule. Again, we'll discuss that a little bit later on. But a lot to talk about and a lot to discuss with how these new freshmen and how these new players are going to get the chance to prove themselves with Scott Frost and his team. But Nebraska, again, really hurting themselves and shooting themselves in the foot throughout the game. 11 penalties for 136 yards on Saturday. That is incredible. That's almost as many rushing yards as Purdue had just in penalties. So you're giving Purdue so many more opportunities They're extending drives with these penalties. They're hurting Nebraska's offensive chances. Special teams, again, has been a big issue for the Huskers all season long. Still can't quite get that to click. A rough kick by Barrett Pickering. Didn't even make it close on the 50-yarder. And again, big returns taken away. Dumb penalties all across the board. This team really does not know how to play football, it seems like. They're really struggling to get anything moving, anything to click within Scott Frost's system. So I'm anxious to see how this transitions as we move forward in the season. But breaking down the good, the expected, and the bad, I got my 3 categories for you. So the good, we're looking at Devine Ozigbo and J.D. Spielman, the 2 highlight players of the offense on Saturday. And Devine really surprised me. He stepped up into a role where they've been switching out running backs left and right. Greg Bell, Maurice Washington out with an illness all last week, but Wyatt Mazur was warming up, and he got a couple carries late in the game last week against Michigan. Greg Bell has been taking a lot of the heavy snaps, but Ozigbo came in. He was ready this week. He started the game, so that's the first game he started this season, and the man was on a mission. He averaged 10 yards a carry, finishing 17 carries for 170 yards, a couple of scores, including the one on the opening drive, which really kind of gave Husker fans hope. We didn't have to hold balloons for too long, like until halftime or afterwards. But Devine really came out and ran with a purpose. I haven't seen him run like that for a couple of years now, and it's been hard because it's been such a crowded backfield, and he never could quite break away from the pack. I think this was a statement game for Devine Ozigbo, saying that he really wants more carries, he wants to be part of this offense, and he's going to make it happen. He really showed his explosiveness, breaking out some of those big runs, especially around the outside. He's usually the big bruiser back. You want him up the middle for those tough 1 to 2 yards on a third down to get that first down. But he showed some breakout speed, some just burst, getting to the outside, and really kind of opened up this offense. My key to the game coming into this was that Nebraska needs to establish a push up front, needs to get the ball running, and that's going to make the biggest difference moving forward. They dominated the line of scrimmage for the most part in this game. Still struggling with the pass protection, but moving a lot better throughout the game. Nebraska finished with 259 rush yards. You have that stat. You think you're going to be winning games. You think you're going to be winning at least the clock. Purdue still dominated time of possession, and that's something, again, that is just going to come with time. Scott Frost runs a pretty quick offense, and on Nebraska's scoring drives, they looked really good. They looked really crisp. They were marching down the field. There weren't a lot of negative plays. They were able to overcome some. Again, the penalties kind of hurting them. But just a really balanced attack from Nebraska this game. 259 yards on the ground, 323 through the air. Purdue's defense is not one of the top tier in the Big Ten by any means, and they were typically giving up a lot of yards. But Adrian was able to use his legs a little bit more. He was able to get out of the pocket and move the pocket a little bit with his rollouts, able to spread the ball around. There were 8 different receivers that caught a pass in Saturday's game. J.D. Spielman leading the way. He's my other bright spot, my other good spot of this game. 10 receptions, 135 yards, 2 TDs. Again, he's kind of that spark, that dynamic playmaking type kid that you got to have. Hasn't been able to get much going with the special teams. He returned a couple punts. He had a couple good returns, but they were brought back by penalties. Again, Nebraska always shooting themselves in the foot. So getting him out in space is going to be key. Again, the offense is starting to click. I'm really liking what I'm seeing. The last few weeks, Michigan, obviously, kind of an exception. Michigan just dominated everything in that game. But Colorado and Troy, there's been flashes of the offense, and they're starting to bring it together slowly but surely. I think by the end of the year, Nebraska's really going to start clicking on offense, and these mistakes are going to start becoming minimal. Defense and special teams is really going to be the focus of improving this team as we move forward. Jump into the expected category. This is kind of a neutral one. Nate and I used it last year to say either we expected something good and it happened or expected something bad and it happened. For me in this game, it was kind of something bad. I expected David Blau to continue his success, and boy did he ever. He had, coming into this game against Nebraska, he had 868 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, and just 1 pick in the previous 2 games alone. So he's on kind of a hot streak. Continued that with his performance against Nebraska. 328 yards, just 1 TD through the air, but Purdue dominating dominating the line of scrimmage for their offensive side. I think both offenses really kind of showed that they were the top side of the ball in this game for both teams. Neither defense could really slow down each other. Purdue's defense got a few more stops. Obviously, that's why they're winning 42-28. But David Blau using his legs, able to scramble out of the pressure, able to scramble out of the pocket, finished with 38 rush yards, had the goal line touchdown QB sneak. But his success for Purdue is really good, really kind of showing what this team was meant to be this season and what it's going to be for the rest of the season. They're a 2-3 team that could easily be 5-0. Easily be 5-0. Their 3 losses are by combined 8 points. They had a tough one to Northwestern at home that they blew with a bad penalty call, a dumb play. So again, dumb mistakes kind of hurting these teams. Lost on a field goal to Missouri. Eastern Michigan, that's just a kind of a flop game. You don't want to lose that game, but again, a combined 8 points for 3 losses. Purdue's a very solid football team, especially offensively. Jeff Brom, one of the best offensive minds in the nation right now, especially in the Big Ten, can really put up numbers. David Blau taking over that starting role. I think he's going to really make some waves later on this season. He already broke a school record that Curtis Painter held for most pass yards in a game a few weeks ago. He's had over 1,100 yards in just the past 3 weeks throwing the football. Purdue's offense is really going to get moving as the later parts of the season come around. As for Nebraska, the secondary, knew that was going to be an issue coming into the season. They really have a lot to step up on, and they covered well for the most part. There was a couple. DiCaprio Boodle struggled early in the game, but really bounced back. And the big issue that I wanted to point out with the secondary comes with Lamar Jackson. Before halftime, Markel Dismuke picked off a pass, but Lamar Jackson had a holding penalty, which negated the interception. Gave the ball back to Purdue. Finally trying to get some momentum, and the Blackshirts, again, still dumb penalties and kind of mess it up. Purdue ends up getting a touchdown or a field goal off that drive, I believe. And over on the sideline, I was calling the game for radio for my class, and our sideline reporter, Jake Bartecki, sends up a report to us saying that Scott Frost and Lamar Jackson got into a little heated argument on the sideline and just kind of kept escalating. Lamar Jackson ends up pushing Scott Frost and shoving him. I don't think Scott Frost liked that very much, and I would never push Scott Frost because the man can power clean like 400 pounds. But Scott Frost pushed him right back, sent him to the locker room early. We did not see Lamar Jackson on the field in the second half. He stood over on the sideline in the corner by himself, nobody near him for the entire rest of the game. That's going to be a storyline to watch as we move forward. We'll see how that relationship kind of pans out. Lamar Jackson has not been the star player that we all imagined him to be. Come in a 4-star recruit, highly recruited, really touted guy. You thought he's a big guy. He's in the secondary. You thought he's a big playmaker. Just really hasn't lived up to the hype yet. And I thought he would do well under Scott Frost in his system. I thought Scott Frost's defense was a good fit for Lamar. Still, again, having that riffs with the players, that's what this team needs to work on, that discipline and just really buying into Scott Frost and his program. It's not going to get fixed overnight. We're not going to just start winning the rest of the season just because all the guys believe in Scott Frost now, and we all believe in Scott Frost as fans or as the media. But if some of the older guys start believing in, and the younger guys for sure believe in, and then when the new recruits get there, they all see everybody else is bought in, they want to buy in. That's how you build these cultures. That's how Alabama is so consistent and winning these championships. You have to build the culture from the ground up. It's nothing really to do with the previous administration. Again, there's some lingering issues, but there's a lot of foundation set up from them as well. So it's not like it's all bad coming from Mike Riley. It's just guys really need to start clicking with Scott Frost. He needs to be able to connect with his guys too. I think there's a little bit of disconnect there, and that's why Scott Frost is having so many issues. That was the bad part of the game. Again, really frustrating for Nebraska. Still having issues with the penalties, still having issues with special teams, and then that big issue right there, just that disconnect of Scott Frost and his players. I kind of expected David Blau to have a solid game. He did. I expected Nebraska to kind of match that on offense. They did for a while, mostly in the second half in that third quarter. But first half, after that opening drive, Nebraska could not do anything. Dumb penalties, shut down drives, and just lack of execution. This offense is so close to just breaking one open and having a big game, but they're just not quite there yet. It's slowly but surely moving up. That's the good with this offense. They expected, again, Blau having a big game. The bad, we really got to watch that storyline with Lamar Jackson and Scott Frost. Now, we'll come back in just a moment, and my co-host from last year, my good buddy, my roommate Nate, he'll be calling in, and we'll be talking all more college football, some QB transfers, the 4-game rule, and our September Heismans. Stay tuned. You're listening to College Football Know-It-All on KRNU2.
Hey, what's up? Holla at your boy. XOXOXO. You getting these texts? Question mark. Where are you? What are you doing? OMG, you are making me mad. You better text me back. I'm waiting outside your house.
Relentless, aggressive texting is like
Air, fundamental to all living things, and it's all thanks to trees. Not only do trees supply oxygen, they also provide homes to wildlife, filter water, and let's not forget their natural beauty. But the trees need your help. The Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation is doing their part to revitalize forests across the country, and you can help. Donate to the Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation today by visiting www.arborday.org. Be that breath of fresh air and ensure forests live on for future generations.
When you think of an animal shelter, you think of rows of cages with animals locked up behind them. At the Cat House, that's not the case. The Cat House is a no-kill shelter located at 36th and O Street that provides cats with open rooms to allow comfort and the ability to move around so visitors can get to know the cats more easily. They are also able to send cats to foster homes where they can live until they are chosen for adoption. So come on in and get to know the cats, and maybe you'll find the right fit for your home. For more information on the Cat House and adopting cats, visit us at thecathouse.org.
Catholic Social Services performs works of mercy all across southern Nebraska. CSS provides food, housing, and cash assistance to those in need. You can help too by donating or volunteering at any location in the Lincoln Diocese. So what are you waiting for? Answer God's call today and give generously to Catholic Social Services. Stop by the Lincoln location at 2241 O Street or donate online at cssis.org. Catholic Social Services, serving southern Nebraska since 1932.
Dad, I'm hungry. Why don't we have anything to eat?
Those are words you never want to hear as a parent. But unfortunately, putting food on the table is a constant struggle for many low-income families here in Lincoln, and they don't have the necessary skills to get and maintain a job. They rely on volunteers at the Center for People in Need that can help them through the struggle. You can make a difference in their lives by getting involved in one of the many volunteer programs that the Center for People in Need offers. For more information, please visit centerforpeopleinneed.org.
Whoa, what are you doing, honey?
What? I'm just cleaning up a stain in the baby's room.
Why don't you use a safer alternative? Bleach is a corrosive chemical that can really hurt someone, especially our daughter. It causes burns, eye damage, irritation, and can have long-term effects on the environment, groundwater, and community.
Oh, where'd you hear about that, Miss Expert?
I've gone to one of their collection events. You can learn more at lincoln.ne.gov, keyword household.
A message from the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department.
And we are back with some college football know-it-all here. Alex Fernando with you on this beautiful Monday evening. It's nice and crisp outside. Got some good football weather, and we're talking some football. Unfortunately, it's looking like my phone is not going to work, and I'm not sure if we can get Nate in. We're going to keep trying here. But in the meantime, we're just going to kind of go over my September Heismans, all right? The September Heisman is an interesting category because this is who really stands out during September and then typically falls off the face of the earth for the second half of the season. Most notably and most memorably just from last season, Mr. Saquon Barkley. Everybody was ready to hand him the Heisman at the end of September. Absolutely dominated that month, and that's just kind of where it fell off. Looks like we get the call from Nate now. Let's see if we can make this work. Hello. All right, Nate, we will get you switched over to the mic here. Just one moment for me.
You got to take the lead on this.
All right, Nate, I think we got you up and running. Can you talk for me?
Hey, how's it going, Alex?
Hey, there we go. Nate, welcome to College Football Know-It-All. Kind of sad I don't have you in the studio with me like we did last year, but I'm still ready to talk football with you.
It's good. It's good to be back. I thought I would assist you a little bit on your pilot episode of College Football Know-It-All. Even though I am out of the university system, I can still assist in any way I can.
That's right. Our good buddy Nate has graduated, moved on to the real world of adults. He's adulting right now, just on his lunch or his dinner break from work. And while we got you for your dinner break, Nate, I want to know right off the bat here, who is your September Heisman? Like the good Heisman who's actually going to possibly win it, and the September Heisman who's going to fall off the face of the earth?
Now, I think this one's going to be pretty obvious, but the one who's going to win it is Tua Tagovailoa.
Okay, the Bama quarterback.
Yes, it seems pretty obvious because, Alabama's awesome. Tua's been awesome. I think I saw some stats that said he's like the best third down efficiency passer in the game, and like if they extrapolated his stats, since he's never like played in the second half, except for like the A&M game, then he would, easily surpass everybody else. He's only been hurt by the fact that his team has won by so much.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was watching one of their games the other day, and at the time, I think he might have missed a pass or two now, but at the time he was 100% on third down throws. One had not missed a single third down throw through the entire season thus far.
Exactly, and for Tua, this is important because I think a lot of people are actually underrating him for the Heisman, in my opinion. And I think it's for one specific reason, and that is because Alabama is so good that it is to be expected.
Fair point, but do you think that they'd be scoring 54.3 points a game with Jalen Hurts at the starting quarterback?
No, Tua is amazing. He's by far the best quarterback Saban's ever coached. He is outstanding. He is a prototypical NFL passer. I am assuming I hate to call him like dynamite on Sundays already as a sophomore, but he looks very much like he has the skills to make it very far up to the next level even.
Definitely.
He can make the reads. He has the athleticism. He has the arm strength. It's the perfect package for him. But Alabama is so good this year that I think a lot of people are just kind of, they see Tua and they go, oh yeah, Tua, that guy, he's good. He's good. Now, who are the actual interesting people to talk to? Because Bama wins every game by double digits.
I know, you're right. Like, it's crazy too because he's only been starting for 5 games now. He only began this season as a starter, and he's really kind of taken on that role, obviously. But you're right. I think Bama as a team, as collectively, they're just so dominant in every facet of the game. You forget that their quarterback might be one of the more dominant players as well, like overall in the nation, just because their team is so head and shoulders above everybody else.
Exactly, and I know I am not, this is sort of just a me thing, but I personally have not probably watched 3 minutes of an Alabama game this year. I probably watched half a quarter of the A&M game, but I just everything else I just haven't been interested. I mean, I don't want to watch Bama blow out a team 67-0. Like, that's not interesting. And I think for a lot of casual fans, that's not interesting to them either. So they're not really tuning in and watching Tua play.
Definitely. Now, switching the script a little bit, who's your September Heisman who's going to fall off the face of the earth for this second half of the season? Kind of like Saquon Barkley did last year. That was my example prior to your phone call. Is everybody was ready to hand Saquon the Heisman after September, leading up to the Ohio State game. Then they kind of flopped. He didn't have a great game, and everybody kind of forgot about him. He still had a great season, still one of the best running backs in the Big Ten, and moved on now with the New York Giants, second overall draft pick. So who this year is your Heisman that's going to just disappear?
You're going to hate me for this because I know you love this team and this player, but Will Grier.
Will Grier and West Virginia. Why, Nate? Why are you doing this?
I don't think they're a national title contender. I think they're a good team. I think they're a solid team. I think they're a threat to win, 9, maybe even potentially double-digit games. But I think there is going to be a game like Saquon Barkley where Grier doesn't have a good game, and honestly, I don't think it's even going to be on Grier. I think it's going to be on that team. But as the Heisman has, predicted over the last, so many years of its existence, it's not just a, player-only statistics. Now, you can be, a great player on a average team, kind of like Lamar Jackson was a couple years ago.
Yo.
But by and large, if your team is not amazing, then you're probably not going to win the Heisman. And I think West Virginia, as a team, has a dangerous ability to potentially get exposed against a team like Oklahoma, against a team like Texas. It's just worrisome to me. And, after you have one or two games where you're just not that great, they kind of pencil you out of the Heisman.
Yeah, you are correct. It's definitely more of a team award. The team kind of builds you up to that award more so than you just go out and win it all the time. And looking at West Virginia's schedule, their next 3 games should be more than manageable. Kansas at home, at Iowa State. Could be kind of tricky, but I think they can manage that. And then Baylor at home. The real meat of their schedule is that back half. From all of November is at Texas, home versus TCU, at Oklahoma State, and home versus Oklahoma. So I think it's going to be a pretty simple October for the West Virginia and Will Grier. He'll still put up those crazy numbers. It's if he can get through that November stretch. That's what's really going to determine his Heisman status or not. I think he has the capability to do it. Watching this West Virginia team, they are flying to the ball on defense, and on offense, nobody can stop them. They have some of the best receivers in the nation, and the way his passes are incredible.
No, I 100% agree with you that Grier is an amazing football player and definitely deserves consideration. I just think out of all of the big-name frontrunners through September, his is the most likely to be like, oh yeah, Will Grier, he's good, but too bad West Virginia finished 8-4.
Yep. Okay, I can see that. We'll see. I picked West Virginia as a playoff contender though, so I'm not going to follow you on the 8-4 thing, but I see where the team can drag him down. I see what you're saying there.
And I could be wrong. I mean, even just now I remember, Robert Griffin won his Heisman on a 6-6 Baylor team.
Exactly.
You can definitely do that, and you could definitely take your team and definitely surpass them. So it's not just an either-or thing, but I think the vast majority of the history of the Heisman basically says that you need to be an elite team to be in the conversation.
Speaking of that history of the Heisman, just real quick, are there any running backs you think that are going to jump in and possibly take it this season?
Any running backs?
Because Bryce Love's had a tough season. Jonathan Taylor already has a loss. Bryce Love now has a loss with their teams.
Honestly, I don't think so. I think it's a quarterback's award this year.
A very heavy quarterback class as well.
There are some other, but yeah, the running backs with Bryce Love, he's been injured a couple games, and unfortunately, that pretty much ends his Heisman hopefuls this year. Jonathan Taylor, he's been good. He's been Jonathan Taylor, but there's been no excitement based around. He hasn't really had any of those eye-popping stats that he had his freshman year, sophomore growing pains.
Well, he does play the Huskers this coming weekend. I'm sure he'll get something going.
Are we going to see another rushing record broken?
Oh, I hope not. There's possible, though. Now,
it's very possible.
Transitioning on the quarterbacks a little bit, I want to talk to you, Nate, about quarterback transfers, especially like Tristan Gebbia at Nebraska or Kelly Bryant with Clemson. Quarterbacks who, fighting for the starting job, end up losing the starting job and then just say, peace, I'm out.
Well, I think it's a complex issue from a fan's perspective because obviously, you root for the team and you want them to do about as well as they can do. And having a competent backup quarterback is part of that equation. But overall, this transfer rule, I support it because it supports the players. I am a big player advocacy in college football. Players don't have a lot of power in college football, so I am for any little bit of power the players can grab and take for themselves and be able to say, you know what, I want to do what's best for me, what's best for, my career, what's best for my future prospects, what's best for my family.
Yeah.
I am 100% for all of that. So that's why I don't hate on Tristan Gebbia for transferring before the season. I don't hate on Kelly Bryant for transferring 4 days before he probably would have been put back in as the starter. I mean, players got to do what's best for them, and I am 100% for that.
Now, for our listeners who don't know, the NCAA has brought in a new rule for college football saying that freshmen or any player actually can play up to 4 games and still be available and be offered a red shirt for that season if they play. If they play any more than 4 games, then that red shirt availability is no longer there. So the biggest thing was this past week. You mentioned Kelly Bryant probably would have been back in the starting position because the freshman quarterback Trevor Lawrence, stud player, highly recruited, kind of the new face of Clemson moving forward, is kind of the youth that they want to bring in. The offense that they kind of want to run opens up the playbook with him. He gets injured in the first quarter against Syracuse. Clemson's already down, and he takes a big shot to the head. He's out the rest of the game with a head injury, and you're looking around, where's Kelly Bryant? He could be playing right now, and he could be leading us to victory. Yeah, he's gone. So they bring in their third stringer, Chase Bryce, much like Nebraska had to do against Colorado. Adrian Martinez playing a solid game, keeping us in it, gets his knee twisted. Andrew Bunch has to come in. Andrew Bunch would be typically the third stringer, if not the fourth stringer, with Noah Vedral having to sit out this year for the transfer rules. But Andrew Bunch, he's played well this season. I have no arguments against Bunch whatsoever. I know we've kind of differed on that at home, but I think Andrew Bunch has played. I think Andrew Bunch has played phenomenally for the position he's in. But he's not a player that you typically want as your starting quarterback or in a role where he would be playing a heavy amount of minutes. He started and played the entire Troy game because Tristan Gebbia is not here. The fans obviously feel very upset about this because they're like, wow, you're supposed to be one for the team. Where are you going? Just bailing on your guys like that. And then it puts the team in a hole because when your starter goes down, you're down to your third string, not your second string. You mentioned, again, that power to the players. Again, I'm still kind of in between. As a fan, obviously you're like, wow, you just kind of screwed over the team. But you're right. The NCAA does not have a lot of help and support for these players on their own. Anything that kind of goes their direction, giving them the opportunity to make some more of their own choices and get the best benefits for themselves, I'm kind of on board with that.
Exactly. And I want to point out an analogy. This isn't a perfect one because it's, different levels of the sport. But you think about Earl Thomas this last week for the Seattle Seahawks, and he got injured, and, his career is going to be affected because he made a decision to, take one for the team basically and play, and that's going to negatively affect his career.
Yeah.
And so for these kids, I say kids, they're like 1 or 2 years younger than I am, but for these kids, they, you got to let them make their decisions that they want. Personally, I wouldn't be opposed to lessening the restrictions on transfers even more. Honestly, at this point, but like I said, I am very much a players fan. I want them to have all the power they can because I know a lot of the way the NCAA runs college football is very, maybe I don't want to say anti-player, but it's very, very system biased instead of individual bias. And I think anything that changes that pendulum towards the other end is mostly a good thing, in my opinion.
Now, I know both of us could go on about the NCAA and how it's bad for players for days, but one last question for you here is, with opening up and loosening those transfer rules and having the 4-game redshirt thing now, how far do you go before it comes kind of a free agency for all of these transferring players? And how do you manage that as a coach when you could start maybe recruiting, shopping around? Like, if I'm a coach, am I trying to call up Kelly Bryant right now?
I mean, maybe. I mean, obviously the free agent situation is when you have completely free and open transfer rules, no restrictions, no sitting out a year. You can just go and transfer to whatever school you want for whatever reason, you want. And honestly, I could almost be convinced that would be a good thing as well. Maybe not for the health of the game as a competitive institution, but you could already argue that the game is so stratified anyway that it doesn't really matter. Alabama averages the number one recruiting class over the last 5 years. It's not like they're getting stopped from getting all the talent they want. But, I think the argument you could make pro that is very much just basically it's a school. They're trying to get an education too. And if I went to the University of Nebraska and said, hey, I want to transfer to the University of Kansas because I want to study, I don't know, art or something, and they were like, no, you can't go to Kansas, that's bad for you. You can't go. I'd be like, well, what the heck? Why can't you let me go to Kansas for school? And I think something similar like that would be the argument for an open free agent transfer system. Not that I think it would ever get to that point. I think the rules as currently stated work pretty well. I think I would probably lessen a restriction-based. I wouldn't let coaches restrict where a transfer could go, but I would probably keep the 1 year sit-out rule if I had to make my perfect system, really.
Gotcha. Well, definitely something that's been a huge focus for the NCAA and a huge focus for administrations over the last few years. And with the new rule and with QBs transferring left and right if they don't get the starting job, definitely going to be something to watch over not only the rest of this season, but the years to come.
Indeed.
Well, Nate, I really appreciate you calling in during your dinner break just for me and my first show. You're a good roommate and a good friend, so I appreciate that. Miss having you on as a host, but I'll let you get back to work, my man.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Have a good show, man.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one, Nate. Thank you for calling in.
Bye. See you guys.
That was my good buddy Nate Mielbach, current roommate, but one of my best friends, and again, my co-host from last year when we hosted the Second String. Always love talking football with him. I'll be back talking football in just a moment. You're going to be listening to more college football know-it-all action with your host, Alex Fernando. We'll be back in just a few.
100 years. A long time, right? The Daily Nebraskan has been the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's official student newspaper for over 100 years. UNL is a school's tradition, and that tradition includes the Daily Nebraskan. The Daily Nebraskan is your source for news, sports, arts and entertainment, and opinion. Everything is written by students, for students. Support the DN and pick up a paper copy, or go online. Remember the Daily Nebraskan. It's UNL tradition.
Check out my new time machine.
Does it work?
Hit the button.
Hey, it's Napoleon.
Oui. Check out the future.
Hey, you have a nice house. Why don't I?
You didn't save any money, buddy.
If only there was a way I could go back in time and fix that.
Yeah.
Save something for the future. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free ways to save, go to feedthepig.org. That's feedthepig.org.
This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
Getting involved on campus, meeting new friends, and networking for the future can seem scary, but Scarlet Guard makes it easy for both graduate and undergraduates. Social events help students connect with others around campus, while the professional events help students network with alumni from around the globe. Possibilities within Scarlet Guard are endless, so join today. Go to huskeralum.org/scarletguard or contact the Nebraska Alumni Association. Students today, alumni tomorrow, Huskers forever. We are back with some more college football know-it-all. I'm Alex Fernando, your know-it-all friend, and looking ahead to Week 6 in college football, we got some good games. I'm not going to give you my prediction on this one. I just got to tease you with it. The Red River rivalry, Texas and Oklahoma. Game day is going to be there. Texas might be looking like they're back. Their defense has been playing really well. Oklahoma almost had the stumble against Army a couple weeks ago, but turned it on hardcore against Baylor. This is going to be an interesting game. I'm really anxious to see how a sophomore Sam Ehlinger plays against Oklahoma. Again, not as strong as the defense as they've had previously, and Texas starting to get some things clicking on offense, but defense is really where this game's going to be won. Can Texas slow down Kyler Murray? Again, another Heisman hopeful. Kyler Murray has been phenomenal this season. He has 1,460 yards, 17 touchdowns, and just 2 picks on the season. Has been getting it done on the ground as well. This is a dynamic player to watch. I'm really anxious to see how the Texas defense can slow him down. Murray, again, also he's completed 70% of his passes. Texas is going to have a tough day slowing him down, but this is going to be a good game to watch. 11 a.m. Central Time kickoff. That's going to be a fun one. I'm ready. I hope you guys are ready as well. Now looking at some more games around the country, just getting some interesting thoughts on a couple of these. LSU at Florida. Florida coming off a big win at Mississippi State. Their only loss so far is to Kentucky. People kind of forgetting about Dan Mullen in Florida. Starting to get that team turned around. LSU comes to town. Obviously a very tough defense, but the Tigers coming up with some offense lately. I'm starting to buy into them. I wasn't really initially with them. Even after the Auburn game, it was still taking me some. They drafted on Ole Miss. They got a tough schedule coming up. They're at Florida this week, but then they get Georgia, Mississippi State, and Bama all at home, but in a 4-week span, back to back. So a lot of power coming on that Tigers schedule. We'll see if they can make it through. I like what their defense is doing. I really like what their offense is doing. They're starting to get things clicking. Joe Burrow, the transfer from Ohio State, nothing dynamic, nothing flashy, but just a consistent, steady pace on the offense and really not making many mistakes. That's what you got to do to win games. That's what the good teams do, and that's why LSU is 5-0 and number 5 in the nation right now. So looking at some more games, Clemson on the road at Wake Forest. Wake Forest hasn't looked the best. They have some potential weapons on offense, and Clemson kind of, again, who knows if Trevor Lawrence is going to be ready? I don't know. They got Chase Bryce. He looked like he's been doing just fine. I think they kind of had their trap game last week with Syracuse at home. On the road, I think they'll kind of get it back together. They'll have a week with Chase Bryce to prepare. Demon Deacons shouldn't do too much damage to the Tigers. Looking in the Big Ten now, Iowa and Minnesota. Minnesota hasn't been able to prove much. Iowa coming off a bye week. They had to sit on that loss to Wisconsin for a couple weeks now, trying to fight their way back in the division. Starts right here on the road at Minnesota. I expect a big game out of Nate Stanley, and especially that Iowa defense. They're going to lock down Minnesota pretty quickly. Kentucky on the road to Texas A&M. This is going to be one of my must-watch games this weekend. It's on ESPN, 6 o'clock kick, and you're going to want to watch every minute of this game. Jimbo Fisher, head coach of Texas A&M now, he's really taken over and really kind of got the guys to believe that he's going to get it done. That's what all new head coaches are hoping for. Again, I mentioned earlier, Scott Frost still struggling with that connect on the players, still struggling to really connect with them and make a difference and make them believe that they're going to get it done. Jimbo has kind of got them there. It's kind of off and on. They're struggling in some games. They were close with Clemson. Bama just kind of got blown out, kept it close for a little bit. Kellen Mond, I think, is one of the best and hottest quarterbacks in the nation. This kid is an absolute baller. You're going to want to watch him because the Kentucky defense has been stout this year. Mond's only a sophomore. He's got over 1,200 yards this season, 7 touchdowns, 4 picks. Not the best completion rating. It's sitting at 60%, but he makes plays and really moves that pocket a lot like Martinez does for Nebraska. Mond, a little bit more experience, having some game time last year, but is able to move the pocket, and really, it's hard for teams to bring him down. He's a big kid, and I don't know. Kentucky's a solid defense. I'm kind of on the Kentucky train. Benny Snell's been getting me to buy in. He's a dark horse Heisman candidate, at least to get on the finalist list. If you're going to look at a running back, I think it's Benny Snell, and if Kentucky is able to keep this momentum going, they're going to need some better quarterback play out of Terry Wilson. Texas A&M has a very tough pass rush. They're hard-nosed defense. They don't give up a lot of points. Averaging 21.4 game. Again, they played Bama, so that kind of spoils it, but they held down Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence both. Were able to make that a close game and tight game. This could be tough for Kentucky. If they're able to win this game on the road in Aggie land against the 12th man and against the Aggies, they have a very manageable schedule up until that November 3rd date with Georgia. Georgia does come to Lexington, but other than that, very manageable schedule for the Wildcats. This is a team to watch out for in the SEC East. I'm really keeping my eye on them. This is going to be a good game to watch come Saturday night. Nebraska, Wisconsin. Looking ahead to that game, I know I really don't want to. Wisconsin likely going to roll. Nebraska still has a lot to fix. And if they gave up 188 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns to Purdue, imagine what Wisconsin's going to do. This offensive line averages 6'6", 315 across the board. These guys are huge. They're experienced. They all are returning from last year. Nebraska did not fare well against them last year. They started off the game well in the first half, but that third quarter rolled around and Wisconsin just started egging them on and just really brought in that discipline and their experience and their conditioning. Nebraska wasn't able to keep pace with them last year, and Wisconsin's also coming off a bye week. They got a rest after their tough game at Iowa. They lost their last game at home against BYU. They're looking to get Camp Randall rowdy again. Wisconsin's going to have a big game against Nebraska. I think that Jonathan Taylor could have a breakout game this week, and hopefully it's not too bad, not as bad as Melvin Gordon a few years ago for Huskers' sake, but really Nebraska's got a lot to work with and a lot to work on for this game. Now, going to be late night, but Pac-12 after dark, Utah at Stanford, both coming off tough losses, and Stanford, I thought they might contend for a possible playoff spot. They looked good fighting back against Oregon. Notre Dame surprised me. Notre Dame is looking like a playoff team. They have a very manageable schedule. They go to Virginia Tech this coming week. I'm going to switch over to Notre Dame real quick, and we'll get back to Stanford, Utah. But Notre Dame, very manageable schedule. After their road game to Virginia Tech, they got Pitt Navy at home, on the road to a questionable Northwestern, Florida State, who has looked abysmal this season early on, Syracuse, very tough at home, and then at USC to finish it off, who's starting to gain some momentum. But again, the Fighting Irish definitely vying for that playoff spot, and we'll talk about the playoff in just a moment here. Jumping back to Stanford and Utah. Again, two teams in the North that are really trying to kind of make their presence felt and trying to push Washington for kind of that top North title. Stanford, I think, has the best shot. Oregon might have an outside shot to at least climb back in or upset Washington. Washington obviously looks the toughest, really handled BYU well last week. Utah's a dangerous team. They play really tough defense, one of the best in the nation, 16.3. They haven't quite got it figured out on offense yet with Tyler Huntley, but once they get him going, if they can keep the ball in his hands and get the ball to their running back as well as Zach Moss, those two guys are kind of what make that Utes offense run. Stanford is still not doing well with the ground game. Bryce Love, only 327 yards on the season through 5 games. He's been injured a little bit, as we mentioned earlier, so going to be an interesting one. But Utes on the road, I don't know. I think this one's going to be a little bit closer. Stanford wanted to bounce back after their loss, but Utah's a tough team. It's going to be a little bit tighter. Both these teams are averaging under 20 points given up for the game throughout the season so far. Now, transitioning into my playoff predictions, I want to acknowledge that it's only September. Teams are only 5 to 4 games in. There's a lot to be said, a lot of games to be played, but I got a few teams that are out and a few teams that are definitely in. I'll start with the in because that makes it easy. Bama, they are absolutely head and shoulders above everybody else. It is going to be nearly impossible to knock them off. I don't know who could do it, honestly. Tua, I was doubting him early in the season. I thought that he was going to struggle a little bit more than he has. I really didn't think that he was the favorite to win the Heisman. Everybody was saying, all the odds were saying that he's the number one Heisman coming in. He's got the odds to win it. He's the guy. I'm like, he's played a half of football. He's a great quarterback, played a great half of football, but you can't just give him the Heisman nod right now. I'm starting to buy into that. He's making me a believer. Georgia, if they can get by Kentucky, that's a key. If they get by Kentucky, they're going to face Bama in the SEC championship. Right now, I think Bama looks like the better team, and I think Bama will probably win that game. But Georgia, again, they played them toe-to-toe last year, brought them to overtime. Couldn't quite hold on to the lead, but deadly team with experience. Ohio State getting the big win against Penn State. Jumping back to that game this past weekend, I picked Penn State to win because Trace McSorley is an absolute gamer. This kid needs to have the ball in his hands. He is incredible, honestly. He had a career high 170-plus rushing yards. He threw for over 250. What bothers me is Penn State lost this game because of a dumb play call at the end of the game. 4th and 5. They're on the right side of the 50. They're down by 1, less than 2 minutes to go. And you think, this kid's brought us here. This kid hasn't lost a game in Beaver Stadium his entire college career. This kid has lost 10 games, now 11, as a starting quarterback from high school to college. Trace McSorley is the guy you want to put the ball in the hands of. But Penn State chooses to run just a regular handoff up the middle with Miles Sanders, great running back, but he's not Trace McSorley, and he hasn't led this team on numerous comebacks, on a great game. He's been bottled up all game, and you try to run him up the middle against a blitzing Ohio State defense. Obviously lost 3 yards, lost the game. I don't know where the Penn coaches thought that this ball was going to go, but it needed to go to Trace McSorley, and he would have gotten that first down. I guarantee it. He would have won the game. Penn State missed out on a big opportunity. And following the game, James Franklin kind of saying that Penn State is okay with being great right now, and he wants them to be above that. Kind of what Scott Frost saying that this team is at this certain level right now, but we got to move up and we got to stop being okay with being at this level. There's always levels above to move up to, and I'm sure Nick Saban even says that too. That's how Alabama's gotten to be where Alabama's at. They're at this level. They want to move up to the next level. They think that that's how they're going to get there, is just by putting that fire in those players. So Ohio State made a big statement. I think they're in the playoff right now. Honestly, from watching all of these games, I think they might be the only team that could go toe-to-toe with Alabama, and that's like a big toe to a pinky toe. Bama is just head and shoulders dominating everybody this year. They haven't had quite as much competition as Ohio State has, in my opinion. So, again, Ohio State, very well coached with Urban Meyer. Nick Saban for Alabama, very good coach. That's a matchup we haven't seen in a few years. That could be a really interesting game. Dwayne Haskins has been playing really well for Ohio State. Clemson still should be rock solid. Trevor Lawrence come back. He'll lead them to the ACC championship. Now that fourth spot is tricky. I picked West Virginia. I think West Virginia has the tools to do it. Their defense is flying to the ball. They got a favorable schedule. A road trip to Texas is going to be tough, but they get Oklahoma at home. They get TCU at home. We'll see what Will Grier does. Oklahoma might have something to say about that. Texas might even have something to say about that. They're undefeated in conference play, and they're looking to stay undefeated against Oklahoma this week. So really make sure you watch out for that. Those are kind of my 4 teams in the playoff right now. Bama, Ohio State, Clemson, and West Virginia. Kind of looking like what I predicted earlier in the season. There's still a lot of football left to be played. Who's out? Just a couple of them. I don't think Auburn's making it back in, and I don't think Washington. It's a possibility just because of the resume with Auburn. Auburn's got to stay up there to help Washington. Stanford's going to be out, and I think Oregon's probably out too. It's a long way back. If in the Pac-12, it's a long way around to get back into the college football playoff. People just seem to forget about those teams out there. If it's not, if you're not going undefeated or maybe losing one game, you don't really have much of a shot. This is the kind of year, though. Notre Dame, they could potentially be a playoff buster. UCF still undefeated. Kentucky, potential playoff buster. If they win against Georgia and if they miraculously beat Alabama, they'd obviously be in. But just having so many teams, if Kentucky's only losses to Georgia and it's tight, why wouldn't they be in the top 10? Why wouldn't they be close to that like 5, 6, 7 ranking? This is the kind of year where a lot of teams could go undefeated and get a lot of wins, but not make it into the playoff. This is where that push for the 8 team, even the 6 team, but especially the 8 team playoff would come into play and show that this is how the committee needs to eventually push open the door. We'll talk a little bit more about playoff structure in the coming weeks on my show, but I think this is the year where we're going to have a lot of undefeated teams or a lot of one-loss teams that could all potentially be in the playoff, and the committee is going to have a very, very difficult time choosing. Now, the last thing I like to end off my show with is going to be the best thing in college football that I saw this week. Actually, we'll jump back a couple weeks. 2 weeks ago, North Texas had the most amazing punt return. I just like talking about it. I'm still talking about it a couple weeks from now. But they pulled off an incredible punt return against Arkansas. The man caught it, did not weigh fair catch. Arkansas players just didn't even pay attention to it. I can't remember his name at the moment, but North Texas player starts walking. He's got the ball in his hands, gets about 5 yards away from the Arkansas players, and then just bolts down the sideline. 90-yard TD. And I saw it last week too. Guys just are not paying attention to people calling or not calling the fair catch, and guys are getting yards out of it. Defense really got to be paying attention to that, but it made for a great video. I love the hype with it. North Texas, keep doing you. This past week, best thing I saw, best play, Georgia fumble for a touchdown. Jake Fromm's in the pocket. He's getting rushed. Tennessee, only Tennessee could do this, people. But Tennessee comes up, knocks the ball out of his hand, bounces off the ground, and the tight end just happens to be there, falls into his lap. He grabs it, runs 30 yards for a touchdown. It was incredible. I don't know how a team could mess up a sack fumble and let up a touchdown on it, but great awareness by the Georgia tight end, great blocking downfield by the wide receivers once they saw he had it. He just ran around the end, and it's a touchdown for Georgia. That is going to do it for me. Again, I'm Alex Fernando. You're listening to College Football Know-It-All. I appreciate you all tuning in. I'd appreciate it even more if you want to go check out the blog, College Football Know-It-All. It's at collegefootballalex.blogspot.com. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. I'm your know-it-all friend, and I'm signing off. We'll catch you next time.